Founder and editor-in-chief of Curls in the Hood. This evening is very special. We had a 3-part series in the May issue called Church Girl, and I was able to round up all 3 of our fabulous writers. We have Ray Jones, Nikki Blair, and Lisi Felix, aka Brooklyn Book Bell. So welcome, ladies. Don't be nervous.
Hey.
Say this. You can speak. So this month was this is the first time we've ever done anything like this, having 3 writers contribute separately to a conjoined concept, right? And so we had talked about it separately and together, to kind of how this like church wound kept coming up in the women that we encounter in the Curls in the Hood community. And so it kind of naturally came together. I was really excited and really proud of you 3 when I read your works individually, and then how that helped me put it in the issue. So 1, be super proud of yourself. 2, we got a lot to talk about tonight. So we're going to start in the order that they are in the issue. Church Girl Act 1, Don't Hurt Nobody, followed by Church Girl Act 2, Dance Like You Came About the South Girl, and then ending with Church Girl Act 3, Get This Motherfucker Liddy. Yes, let's get into it. So question 1. Well, I'll backtrack for a second. We never assume on Convos with Curls in the Hood that the audience has read your article, right? So just think about that when you guys are responding. Some people may have, some folks only engage with the YouTube channel. And so, you don't have to like relive your article, but just understanding like if there are certain tropes or themes that you want to get into it, take your time to get into it, because sometimes these platforms intersect, a lot of times they don't. So going into Church Girl Act 1, but these questions are for everyone, but I want Ray to start off with her answer. What initially sparked your interest in questioning or reevaluating your relationship with the church? And was there a specific event or realization that prompted this journey?
So simply put, I got pregnant I wasn't even a teen mom. I was 19. So I was entering into my 20s, and I had been in church all of my life. Like that's just I was basically born and raised in church. And the moment that I got pregnant and I started to show was when I started to see other sides of people in this community that I kind of, well, by the time I had joined this particular church, I didn't necessarily grow up with these people, but I had gotten accustomed to them because I had been a part of this church since like my middle school, early high school years. So we were family by then. And I don't know if they did it intentionally or if it was just a subconscious reaction. They were disappointed because I was so involved with youth ministry. I was actually preaching at youth conferences. Just the reaction that I got, it was very visceral, and I was kind of like silently pushed out. And just kind of like looking back in retrospect, I always have to assess, like, did I take it personally or was I really pushed out? And I think it was both and. But that made me really reevaluate the way that we treat people that are kind of on pedestals in ministry, that hold specific positions, and the grace that we give them when they make a mistake, per se. And the way that, the backlash I got once, my baby started to form in the womb. And I just really thought, this can't be the way that God has designed ministry and the way that we treat people when, they make a mistake. Like, humanity just can't operate like that. And so I began to do research on my own, began to, communicate with people that had similar experiences as myself, and just realized that what we grew up knowing to be true was not always accurate. Like, you don't have to be sat down because you got pregnant out of wedlock or you were technically underage. Like, you can still operate and be just as gifted and called even without, having a child or being pregnant. So that's why I reevaluated my
And you know
call.
what's interesting? Because there's a straight line between what happened to you and Lisi in your story, because there's low to no conversation or education around what happens when you're naturally coming of age to want to be interested or curious about your sexuality in church. And so we cultivate this environment where we can't talk to anybody about this very natural interest in the opposite sex, the same sex, what any of the sexes. The below the belt is like 98 degrees and burning, like that juvenile what you call like that album. But you know what I'm saying? Like once you hit a certain age, like the furnace is turning on and it's not turning off anytime soon, right? And so the lack of grace sometimes that happens in this space when like, and Lisa, I'll let you tell your own story, but like when there's also no space for you to even talk about what you might be feeling, if there's a boy you like, or like it's just we've created this it's kind of just like this space where it's bound to happen, and then we abuse the people when it happens, and it's like that's not a nurturing space for cultivating a new life. I'm not going to trust y'all around like if you treat me cruelly while I'm pregnant, there's no way I'm going to trust you with this entity that I'm cooking in my body once it's out. Like how am I supposed, unless I internalize it and then become the mean church mother in 20 years that does it to the next teenage girl that just experiences life. I don't know that it's a mistake. It might have been like you didn't intend to get pregnant, but doing what you were doing to make that baby is very natural at that age, right? So, anyone else want to jump in? And don't feel like you guys all have to answer every question, like.
Yeah, I think to answer the question, mine might seem like a little left field, but I think I started questioning things when I got a clear understanding of how wealthy the Catholic Church was. So my story is a little different. Like I am from the South, but I was raised Southern Catholic. So my family is originally from Louisiana, and Louisiana is a very Catholic state. Like it's built into the traditions and the practices of the entire state. And so when my mother moved from Slidell, Louisiana to Birmingham, we found a Black Catholic church. Like there's an Archdiocese of Birmingham for Black Catholics. And there was this family for us to join. But growing up in Catholicism, the rituals and the traditions are really strong. But I think whenever I moved to New York and I got a really clear understanding of how much money was being circulated, I started questioning why weren't things being addressed financially for people in the world if this entity was supposed to be of God and in the image of Jesus, who was humble and who gave everything he had away and who helped people. That's when I started being like, but wait, these things not adding up. Y'all not really being like Jesus, and I don't really like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that is kind of what has shaped my lens now. So when you look at like the political landscape, when we look at sexuality, when we look at all these things, I'm just like, these people are not really like Jesus, and for me, that's the problem. That is literally what started me on this road. That was it. Yeah.
Nikki, anything from you? Or are you gonna pass?
I'll pass, child. Y'all did great. Yes, yes, absolutely.
All right. So has your decision to shift away from traditional church norms impacted any of your social relationships, particularly within your community or family? And have you faced any challenges or received support along the way as you guys navigate spirituality or, your version of church that might be outside of the four walls that you grew up with?
Yeah, I'll say it's still, even though like my baby's about to be 13 now, it's still awkward uh running into people or even being in the same spaces, because I don't frequent church a whole lot anymore, unless a friend asks me to attend, a service. I've like word on the street was like, oh, she left the church or she's running from God, and that's not it at all. It was like I actually found a different route that worked for me, and I feel closer to God than I ever did being inside of those four walls. So it's still people's perspective of me is very warped. I also think that people think that I'm a witch now too. So
That's exciting.
and I feed into it a little bit. Like, yeah, I'm totally a witch.
Mm.
But yeah, I think my relationship has been warped. I also think that there are some people that have come to the acceptance of it too, and kind of wish that they could lean more into the acceptance that I have come to and be more vocal about it, because they too have come to some type of crossroad. Not like my experience exactly, but they have had some type of awakening themselves, but for whatever reason they're super locked in and they can't walk away from it. So it will have side conversations, but it's just timing. And whenever they feel like they're called to step away from that, they will. Um, and I don't want people to think that I'm anti-God, anti-religion, or anything like that. I'm the complete opposite. I'm just anti-establishment that keep people bound from
Yeah.
embracing their own humanity.
Nikki.
I finally have something to say. I'll start with the part that is at the top of my mind, which is, have you found support or not? And I've definitely found support, but from people and in places that I didn't necessarily expect to find support. So, for instance, given COVID, a lot of people couldn't go to church anyways because, of COVID. And that really opened up the doors for church being virtual, which, I'm AME. I grew up AME. My grandfather's an AME pastor. So you got to be in the pews, that's the way it's always been. And so, bedside Baptist, that was not very frowned upon. And then when COVID came, it was okay, to do the virtual Bible study, to do virtual services. And that was really freeing for me and other women that I was around at the time, because it allowed us to really meet God where we were at times. Every day, every Sunday morning is not equipped for you to get out of bed and get to the church house. Like that was just the reality of my life. I didn't have that type of schedule to where I could do that. And it also, I think, forced, especially the church that I was in at the time, to expand its offerings. They were a lot more flexible as well. And I found support with a group of friends of mine. We were all kind of in that transition stage of, how do we stay connected to God? We have a lot of questions now that we didn't have growing up. We're reading the word for our own selves. We're trying to focus on finding women in the Bible and their stories in the Bible. And we got together and started our own Bible study group. And that was something that I never thought that I would do. Never thought, because who want to add extra Bible study? Like I just never saw myself in that space. But it turned out to be so transformative for me during that time. And we kept it up for about 2.5 years, just really kind of going through the Bible, doing our own thing, equating our own stories and our own lives to what we were reading. And I found a lot of support there for the things that I was going through in my real actual life that I could not tell my pastor, could not tell Elder Jenkins, could not tell Sister So-and-so, because I knew I was going to be judged. And for me, that strengthened and renewed my relationship with God. And it really grew me up. I started answering questions that I'd had, my whole life, and finding those answers myself in the word, not being translated by anybody else, was so empowering for me. So I didn't expect to find that support, but I did, and I'm really grateful for it.
That's amazing. Lacey, do you have anything to add, or do you want me to keep it pushing?
Feel like the old lady at the beginning of COVID. Like, let me see if I could get to this microphone. No, I'm good. Thank you. All of my friends are heathens. No, I'm just playing.
As someone in your direct social circle, I accept that. I accept that.
Thank you. No, they're not. I'm kidding.
Okay, so now we're gonna move into dating and sexuality. Okay, the fun stuff. Sorry. I'm holding seats in hell if anybody is worried about having company down there. In what ways, if any, do you feel that moving away from traditional church teachings has influenced your approach to dating and exploring your sexuality? And has it created unique challenges or opportunities in these areas? Lacey, I'm going to start with you because your article addresses this, I think, the most abundantly. Come on, sister Pearline. Come on.
Who am I today? Like,
It's
who
to the
am
right.
I today?
No.
Jeez Louise. Okay. So yes, and I think I've had time to kind of like think about this. So again, thinking that everyone hasn't read the article, my portion of the article was about my struggles with dating and my connection to my sexuality and pleasure while having sex, because it felt like this very shameful thing that I wasn't supposed to be doing. I wasn't supposed to be talking about. And so Sheree knows I self-inflicted this 5-year celibacy thing and like didn't really have a reason. I was just like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm celibate. Like, and was very like tied to the idea of celibacy without a purpose. And so I think when you are a young person who spends a lot of time in church, I was in a dance group, I was in a youth group, I was in a teen sorority, like I did all the things where I had these amazing grown people around me, and none of them ever opened up dialogue about your body, about sexuality, about even dating, and kind of like really teaching us that dating is just hanging out with someone and getting to know them. We like to interchange dating and courting. And so I think the absence of teaching someone anything just opens the door for them to kind of have to be the blind leading the blind. And yeah, and so I was out there really struggling, and I've been struggling for the last 20 years. I left my mom's house at 18. I'm almost 35. So for me to be coming to the fact that I don't know how to date, I like to think that every person I go on a date with is gonna be my husband. He's not. This is unserious at best. Yeah, so I think my whole issue was that no one said anything. And so if no one tells you anything, right? How do you build a practice or learn how to do anything? So that's kind of where I was at. Yeah.
Anybody else? Oh, see, Nikki done caught the mute button disease.
I'm just gonna keep mine off. Just not even gonna touch it.
It's a struggle. It's a struggle. And I know it's a new moon, so I'm giving myself grace. But baby, that button is real far away and it don't be clicking real fast. But because I touched it anyway, I just got an amen, because when I was reading your article, I found so many parts that were really analogous to my same upbringing. No one ever talked to me about anything. Never got a sex talk. Never got a date talk. Never got a even, do you want to even get married talk. No one ever asked me. It was always the foregone conclusion that that is what I was going to do. And if you even feel that way, nobody even asked me what I wanted in a husband. No one ever asked me anything. And so I had the same struggles, and you find yourself almost using sex as like a bartering tool. You find yourself, which is terrible, which is absolutely terrible, because back to your other point about your pleasure, your needs, the things that you're looking for, when you're trying to use it as a bartering tool for marriage, you're not thinking about yourself, at the first, you're thinking about them, which is, why would you anyway? So I definitely identify, and that was a big part of what was the core of my own writing in my article about writing books with sex scenes in them, very flagrantly adult sex scenes in them, but being a person who was taught you're not supposed to have premarital sex, you're not supposed, like all of those things, and trying to figure out how to find the balance. And oftentimes when writing sex scenes, feeling shamed within myself, not even telling my own, not even letting my own mother, my own matriarchs read my books, because I didn't want them to know that having sex. They knew I was having sex. Come on, because I'm 34, so same. They weren't stupid. But it's a hard line, and it's a weird test that I find women through. I don't find that in the church have those same obstacles. They may have their own. I don't know what they are. I don't know anything about lifestyle because I don't be in men's business. But I feel like as a woman, they just give you this really difficult test that's impossible to pass without any tools whatsoever to be successful. And it leads you down roads that are honestly cycles that are inescapable. You can end up in domestic violence situations, you can end up in worse human trafficking situations. You can end up so many places because
Yeah.
you aren't your body and you've never had the opportunity to experience your own sexuality and explore it. And even outside of those terrible things, you can end up in a relationship where the sex ain't good, and that's just as bad. So, you know, they got I was very very grateful to finally get to a space in my life where I was okay with the fact that I am not a virgin, and I was okay with the fact that not only am I not a virgin, I'm a very sex forward, sex positive person, and finally okay with the fact that I write about it, I enjoy writing about it, and it is honestly very central to the person that I am. Sex is very very important to me, and
Mm-hmm.
that's okay, that's all right.
Well, just know that I be reading the books. Listen, you writing them, I'm reading. Okay, I am a smut pusher. Okay, I think everyone should be reading some smut. If you're not reading no smut, I'm concerned. I'm honestly concerned. What are we doing? What are we really reading? No, I'm sorry.
I
I'm
get
sorry.
it, smut ed. Yes.
I can't stand you. But I think though it's like it can feel a little reductive. Like you reduce the women, the experience of some women in these spaces to their genitals or like their ability to not engage with their genitalia. And I just think it's so incredibly reductive because to your point, Nikki, it's in like because now I'm like, what else is important? Because you put so much emphasis on this, right? Like,
Well,
what are
we
the
put so
things I'm
much
supposed to be looking
emphasis.
for? Right.
Yeah, well, we put so much emphasis on it now. We just see this whole culture of men being like, you're not getting married, you're not having children. What is your purpose? To live? What? Like, what are we really talking about? Do you know, like it's such a, I think I literally was asked this morning. I'm sorry, Sheree, I'm derailing the interview. I was literally walking. So I have the same super. He's been my super for however long, 4 years I've been in this apartment. And it's a little black guy, Jamaican guy. He's like, why are you not married? And I was like, I don't want to be married and I don't want to have children, if that was going to be your next question. And he was just like, I just feel like you're too pretty. And I'm like, men don't even know like how uncomfortable of questions those are. And I don't walk into spaces and ask men, why aren't you married? Where your wife at? I don't care. Like, are you healthy? Are you all right? Okay. Like, are you being safe and doing whatever it is that you're doing? Like, and Nikki, to your point, I think we give women this unattainable rule book of how to be a woman, how to get a husband, how to have children, and I just think it's unrealistic. It's unrealistic, and you see it every day, and we have to combat it every day. And like Nikki said, we don't do that to men. We only do it to women, and it's unfair.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no. Ray, do you have anything to add?
Just wanted to add, when you two were both talking about like pleasuring and getting to know more about yourself, like in terms of like what it is that you like. I know when I was a teenager, like masturbation was preached as like a huge no-no. Like you couldn't even indulge in that. And it was one of those things to where um I mean, obviously, when you're teenagers, your hormones are raging, so it's like you can't explore sexuality, you can't explore masturbation, and so like when you do, it's like, oh no, I'm going to hell, and you're at the altar every Sunday, like God forgive me,
Or you're
like you can
imagining
do
some
any
ghost watching you. You're like, I can't do it. Jesus is watching me.
right, literally. So it was one of those things where it was just like there was just so much shame just surrounding like being familiar with the biological gift that you were given. And I'm
Mm.
32 and I have two children and I'm married and I'm just now being okay with who I am and what it is that I like in sex and the act of it, which is just so wild to me. And it's all stemming from like my upbringing in church.
Ray, I will do a shameless plug. Please, you and your husband take take Sunflower Jones's BDSM test. It's you and your partner do it separately. Y'all can't like don't ask each other, oh, did you click this? Share your results. Don't share, like, don't take the test together. And tell him to take the long form version of the test. Because you can do like a quick, like it's like 2 or 3 pages, but then there's like you're gonna be there for like 5 or 10 minutes on your phone, like, good Lord, yeah. It feels like they're asking you the same question over and over, but it's that psychological thing to just like make sure what you're inputting is true. I think it'll be really interesting. Because I shared my results with a friend, and I just knew this man was like, I was like, oh yeah, like his freak flags high. I got his test results back. I was like, you vanilla ass. He is not a freaky AN or a 69 guy. Okay, let me just say.
But I took that test though, and mine came back way more vanilla than I would ever consider myself either. So I'm just saying,
Sunflower told us, she told me to take it when you are like ovulating, and then take it again maybe like a few days after your cycle when things have like calmed down a little bit. Because you might get different, because women are always in like some hormonal cycle or another, that you might get different results. Like if you're like in that like week after your period and like you're a little apathetic to sex at all, you know what I mean, like your score is going to be a little different, prior from that 10 days prior to your period coming on, where you're like scratching at trees, you know what I mean? Like just put that on. Okay, next question. I can't do nighttime interviews because I'm like losing my mind. Like if my mind is a cup of water, it's a cup of water with a leak in it. And by this time, it's like, I'm just like, I have just enough to make it down the mountain. Like I'm just like, okay. So considering what we discussed already in the current landscape of organized religion, what do you believe are some effective strategies for the church to re-engage and retain Black women without feeling exploitative or one-sided? And I ask this question because what I'm hearing is everyone on this call is still very much connected to God, to their spirituality, to the lessons learned in church, right? But how do we help the church, the institution of church, retain and engage us without exploiting us, or not, or either ill advising us or not advising us at all? If anyone has any thoughts on that. I'm the heathen, so I have none. I am the third party heathen. I'm just here to ask the questions. I don't have any opinions.
My suggestion is honestly allowing for, and how you talked about it earlier, Ray, about the amount of grace that we give leaders, invisible people in church, but we don't give that same grace to congregation members. We don't give that same allowance of their story to actually be told, for their testimony to be valued the way that we do. Like the pastor can get up there and say, I sold drugs, I was a pimp, and I beat my wife, but God,
right now, today,
but God. And then it's all forgiven, and all of a sudden, this pastor, he feels you and understands you because he knows what it's like to be human, and you can see that he's been redeemed. But we, especially as Black women, we don't have those spaces. And for me, those spaces can also exist outside of the church. I think there's such a focus on things happening inside those four walls all the time. My best friend, she's very much an in the temple type of girl, but she says all the time that I'm in the streets, I'm for the streets, in the out yonders. But it makes me think about high key Jesus, how Jesus was everywhere, but in the temple. Now he would go, he was there, but his work and his disciples was out in the world, in the outermost. And that has to be allowed. There has to be room for you to live, for you to actually apply the teachings that you've been taught. If I never experienced life, I wouldn't know for sure that God is real. If I never went through anything, never had any experiences, then everything that I would be saying is just me pontificating, and don't nobody need that. That's not valuable to anybody. So there has to be room for lived experience, and real messy lived experience, not that like cute packaged up,
Mm-hmm.
make it look nice, put a bow on it. Like, people, especially in the church, have to be comfortable with being seen trying. And for me, that I think is the key, especially for Black women, because our roles are so multifaceted. The things that we do in the spaces that we're in require so much of us all the time. If I can't let a load off at church, if I can't let a load off before God, if I can't take all of this off and be who I am and really come as I am, if I can't do it there, then I really can't do it anywhere. And I think the church really needs to hearken to that and understand that ultimately that is what it is intended to be, especially the church being described as the bride of Christ. Like, if anybody should feel comfortable in the church, it should be women, and it should be Black women.
You almost made me want to go. I am lying. I am holding space for the heathens over here. Lacey? Lacey?
Listen,
All right. The Pearly
I'll
may
let Lisa go.
yeah, I'm about
No,
to say Pearly may
no,
struggle with
no,
her
no,
music.
no.
Okay.
So, Ray, if you were ready, I was over here trying to get my pen because I had thoughts. I was over here, y'all, trying to write it down. But I will say this: I think anyone who knows me, I am very like Black people focused. That's the focus. I am also very community focused. And I probably don't speak about this enough, but I really want to see churches in other Black safe spaces get to a place where we're community minded. And so when I started talking about the money, right? So all this money that's being poured into these churches and these institutions, and we don't have the community display of where that money is going. That's what I need, right? I need these churches to be hospitals for spirits, but they also have to help with the finance of the community. And so when I think about other communities that financially are doing better than Black Americans here, right? They practice community finances. And so if we are taking, right, that 10%, y'all love to talk about that 10%. Y'all want that tithe and offering. And I would love to give it, but I want to give it in a way that I know this is directly helping someone. I want to see that money being turned around and pushed back. I don't care if it's a susu. I don't care if it is giving small business loans to your parishioners. No one should be late on their rent when it's thousands of dollars coming into the church on Sunday. These single mothers that we love to talk about, a single mother, help her. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that is my frustration. And that is where I'm at. I'm like, leave the judgment outside. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you can't, and just like Nikki said, if you can't allow grace for people who are having a human experience with the spirit, you know what I'm saying? But also see them and meet them where they're at. Jesus would have never turned single mothers away from the church. They're the most committed ones. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so that's where I'm at. And I get lit with it because I'm like, no, we're doing this community thing wrong. And if this is where the community is, if the body of Christ is where the community is at, that is where our focus should be and how we should really be helping people. That was it. Okay, I got it. And you definitely can't do it to Black women because they be in there every Sunday and they the ones really giving that money. And if y'all ain't gonna help them, who you gonna help? Okay, sorry. Thank you. That was it.
Go ahead, Ray.
I just wanted to add to what Nikki said about how Jesus moved in his life. And I was just talking about this the other day. I was like, Jesus would literally find people off the street that the Pharisees and the Sadducees didn't want nothing to do with and be like, you over there. Yes, I want you to come be on my team. We're going to do this thing over here called ministry. And like, that's what I love the most, was like, it was the most non-idealistic people that he would call to be a part of his crew, and they went out and they ministered. And even like when people were getting ready to stone the adulterous woman, he was like, hold up, if you are without sin, go ahead and cast the first stone. And no one could do it. And I think that it's going to take church folks to kind of be okay with that reconciliation and having that conversation with people that have left the church due to them not giving grace to church members that have either made a mistake and it was very public and it was very messy. Because the reality of it is, a lot of people have done, similar things. They just haven't gotten caught, or they're, in positions where people are more likely to give them grace, as we stated before. But it's just a lot of pride that keeps that conversations from happening, because it's like, oh, you should let bygones be bygones, or you should still continue to come to the church, because how are you going to let people get between you and God? And it's like, I'm not going to keep coming into spaces where I'm going to be ridiculed and abused. So I think it boils down to people just understanding that you have to kind of humble yourself and realize the way that we've been operating and the way that we have treated people. As soon as you realize that a sheep has left the pasture, call them. Say, hey, I noticed that you haven't come. What's going on? And if they say, well, I've been mistreated because I did XYZ, you don't take offense to that and say, okay, come at a Wednesday evening Bible study and we'll stay after church and we'll talk and we'll chop it up. And it actually be a healthy mediated conversation. We should be afforded that.
I love that. So what I'm hearing is grace, radical transparency, and humility, because that's a two-way street. All of these things are two-way street. Oh, I think that this conversation is going to help somebody. Like, I really think that this is such a powerful moment for Curls in the Hood. Thank you guys for adding to the conversation, because there are heathens like me that are going to take something away from tonight. It ain't going to be me. Any personal advice? I'm clowning. I don't want my readers to think that I'm over here, what is it, sigils or something with the witches put on the floor. That's not this. I am being ironic and sarcastic for the sake of this evening's conversation. Do you guys have any personal advice or insights for women that have contemplated stepping away from traditionalism within the church? And if so, what encouragement would you offer to folks navigating similar journeys, right? Because early in the call, we mentioned some of that ostracization that can come with being like, you know what, I'm not going to be in the temple per se.
So my frontal lobe was not developed when I made that decision. And so I kind of acted a little bit irrationally when I was like, I ain't going back. So my biggest piece of advice would be to find a separate community that's kind of journeying in the same direction before you make that separation, because it is very isolating and it is very lonely, and you can slink into depression and have a whole identity crisis, especially if that's all you've known your entire life. Because I went into that a little bit myself. So finding another community that's going to keep you anchored and kind of help you, find healthy coping skills, and also keep you connected to a source, because spirituality is very important. You need to be connected to something that's going to ground you, because this life is very crazy. So if traditional religion is just not for you anymore, begin to research what you are resonating with, because you're going to evolve constantly over time, and find that community and delve yourself into that.
Anyone else? Pearly May, find your mute button.
I really brought my tired work self to the convo today. I'm so sorry, y'all. I was really being serious. I think for me, the thing that I kept asking myself when I felt myself starting to take steps backwards, I don't think mine was like immediate, I'm out. It was very like, this doesn't serve me. I don't really like this. I don't really want to do this anymore. And it was very slow until I found exactly what I was looking for and what fed me and what I needed. But I think in my mind, I kept just being like, oh my God, my friends aren't going to understand. My mother's not going to understand. I wasn't ready to really face it and really be like, it's okay, right? Like there was this little breath back there, like, it's okay. Just keep going, keep stepping back. You're okay. Like, you know what I mean? Until I found that place. And when I gave myself permission to step back is when I feel like it really started to come full circle. And I was just like, oh, wow, like there's peace and there's love, which are all the things that you're taught in church, to be peaceful, to be kind, to be loving. There are all those things. They just start to take a different shape. And so if it's, you don't know how people are going to respond or what's on the other side, just keep going, because you owe it to yourself to give yourself allowance to show up how you need to show up, practice what you need to practice. And if you're a loving and caring human, which is what we're supposed to be in this world, all things will be well. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that is my belief. If you're practicing love as your edict, all things will be well. Yeah.
Nikki?
My only piece of advice would be talk to who you say you serve. If you pray, if you talk to God, have that conversation and sit and listen and wait for, what the response is going to be. A lot of the issues that I've had in my time with church were people inflicted. They were coming from a whole bunch of relationships that were not tied to my actual relationship with God. And when I started to pray on my own without being fed a prayer, without being told, what words to say, and letting myself say whatever I felt I needed to say, it really allowed for our relationship to grow. And the type of intimacy that I now have with God is so personal to me. That the way God talks to me is how he talks to me. And that's for the Lord and I to know. And so I would definitely say, that's for me would be the one piece of advice, because as you both said, the answer might be, yes, it's time for you to leave. It's time for you to go somewhere else because they're not doing my work. I mean, that's very possible. So if you open yourself up to have that conversation, though, you won't have to have some of those feelings of loneliness that you might experience if you try to walk that road alone.
Oh, you guys are such gems. I I actually have a small, I'll interject here for a brief moment. So not many people know, my friends know, right? Like, I grew up in a household that was both Islamic and Christian, right? So my mom was Christian, my biological father was Muslim. He died when I was very young. And I watched my mother, I think for me, because my mother was always on some like, okay, girl, but like, I'm Christian. If I'm going to church and y'all and I'm too young to be left alone, like, I was going to church with my mom, right? And so I watched my mother be harmed by the church in the same way that Ray was. Not so much the teen mom thing, even though my mom had me at 19 as well, but some of the nastiness that came of all of the scenarios that you guys brought forth. Me and my brothers would be like, Ma, this ain't right. Like, you know what I mean? And like, we got to, I'm the only girl. I only have brothers. And I've always had my mom's back. At least he knows my mom. Me and my mom are a freaking frack. Like, and so I was always very protective of my mother, and I took on some of her hurt, I think. And especially once it got older, when I was, grown enough. And I can say that my mom did not force anything on me. So when I told her that I was like more interested in Islam than I was following her in Christianity, she was like, okay, girl, I'm still making a pork shoulder for Thanksgiving, but work that out. But I think seeing that, like you said, but when you are witnessing that before that frontal lobe is developed, I was kind of like, okay, like, yes, that argument always come back. Oh, it's the people, you guys are too focused on the people, but we are surrounded by people. We live with the people are our communities. We are entrusting the people, unless y'all got some pipeline where Jesus is directly talking to you himself. And I got to be around these people. And so, yeah, you're telling me to separate my experience with these people from the word of God. That is a tall order. It's kind of nonsensical to tell me to ignore some of the nastiness that occurs. And it's not even a church thing. It's institutionalism. It's from the hierarchies that are created when we create institutions, and you can't escape that nastiness if you're not at the root cause saying, this is how you lead. This is how you know what I mean? Like, in the Bible isn't enough to be now ministering to hundreds of people. Right. Right. Like, I can be a good dancer that doesn't know how to teach dance. So that I think seeing that for me was always like, I found God in other places. Like I always say that, like I found God in nature. Like I am the most woo woo, walk in the park, stick my hands in the dirt, want to like grow all the things. I talk to the bees. You know what I mean? Like I'm that person. If that makes me witchy, stay on my way. Because the minute a bee teaches me some stuff, it's out. It's on. But you know, I think for me, like if I just giving an alternative perspective, like I was very much like a Nikki. I like read things on my own. I've read the Quran from cover to cover. I've read the Bible from cover to cover. I have my grandmother's Bible. My mom has my great grandmom's Bible, and I keep, you know what I mean. Like even though I'm not somebody that I would consider myself religious, like you can find yourself. There's always someone seeking the same thing you are. So I'll just leave that there before I go into the next question, which is, are there any books, resources, influential works that have been instrumental in shaping your perspective on spirituality, feminism, personal growth outside of these traditional frameworks we've been talking about all night? Pearly May, I know Red Lip Theology is on your list. Find that mute button, girl.
I just wanted to add in a journal book. It's the Book of Tiny Prayers, and it's an unconventional prayer journal. And that's actually a book that I ran across it because I followed the author on Twitter. It's Vermilion Pearl, and I'd seen her obviously in tweeting because she shared so much about her life and her own struggles with Christianity. So I felt I could identify with her in that way. And she actually started, in terms of writing the book, tweeting some of the prayers that she ultimately ended up putting in the book. And the one that stood out to me and made me buy the book was, "Dear Lord, help me get my shit together." And I immediately identified with it. And so I got the book. It is an amazing book. The writing is amazing. The prayers are amazing, very down to earth, very real. And also there are prayers that are Bible influenced. So you can tell that she's, as to your point, Sheree, everybody who read the Bible don't need to be telling other people about the Bible. But you can tell like she's coming from a very sincere place of having done the work, done the researching, and all of that. And then also there's a place to journal. And I have been journaling in that book, honestly, for the past couple years. And watching my growth, watching the way that my relationship with the Lord has changed, it's been really influential for me. So I highly, highly recommend that book all the time.
Right.
Yeah, so one book that I read a couple years ago that absolutely changed my life was it's called "I'm Still Here: Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness" by Austin Channing Brown. And it is about, so Austin Channing Brown, she talks about how her parents gave her that name. So like if she applied for jobs, people would automatically think she was a white male. But she grew up in a predominantly white area, and she went to private white institutions. She went to white churches. She worked for white churches, and she talked about how that kind of like just really radicalized her just as a Black woman. And it's her story was very similar to mine, because even though I grew up in Black churches, I live in Indiana, and the city that I live in is very predominantly white. And it is really hard, finding your agency and always kind of like having to fight for your space in this city. Because everyone likes to play nice until situations arise, specifically in church. And like, we would have, we call them like unity services, where we would invite other churches. And specifically like when the pandemic happened and you started to see like, the protests happened, specifically with George Floyd, and you would see the opinions of people that you'd fellowship with in these church spaces pop up, and how they were not the kindest. And you're like, well, wait a minute, we both, worship the same God. So it was just one of those things where she wrote about that specifically, and how it kind of changed her perception of church, and just how white Christianity is very different than Black Christianity, and Black Christians are not afforded the same grace as white Christians too. So that was a really good book and a quick read.
I have two that are in the January issue under like the spirituality section. We gave a reading list in Curls in the Hood, and I pulled them because I was prepared for this meeting. I pulled them out of my library. And the first one is The Sisters Are All Right, Changing the Broken Narrative of Black Women in America by Tamara Winfrey Harris. This one right here. This is more the feminism route. That this takes on more of that because again, it goes back to that grace conversation of how we're kind of villainized and vilified and all of those things. And this one is The New Spirituality of African American Women. It's called Soul Talk by Akasha Gloria Hull. And it's pretty much a tribute to Toni K. Bambara, but it's like it kind of lends itself to how African American women have been experiencing a revival of spirituality and creative force. And so this book, I think, is like a marriage of the two, right? Like, finding space beyond the walls. Okay, looking ahead, what do you guys envision for the future of Black women in spiritual exploration and self-discovery? And how can we collectively support each other on this transformative journey of redefining faith and identity? Yes, ma'am. We have clowned all night. And
No.
every button. Okay, I was about to say.
It's already off. I was prepared. So I want for every Black woman whose feet touch this earth and who gets a chance to breathe and grow and learn to live for herself, right? And so to start being able to just exist without, you know, of course life happens and we have things that we have to be responsible for, but just to have the ease of just being worried about ourselves and navigating this world with joy. And so I think that means radical like self-love, that means radical love of each other, because I do feel like where goeth the woman goes the culture, and we have to start building these practices, because I feel like as much as we don't like to think that Black Americans are matriarchal, we are. And so everything comes through us, everything moves through us, everything moves because of us. And so we have to start leading with that and putting that at the forefront. Like that's what the thing is, right? And so we have to give each other the grace. We have to support each other publicly. We have to love on each other radically. Like in the last year, I have been loved on by every one of my friends in a way that I didn't even know was possible. Like, you know what I'm saying? And like that gave me strength to be like, I could do anything. I could wait. I have a band of y'all back here who I could be like, okay, so I think I really would like to do this. And it's a chat like, no, you can already do it. You've already done it. You've already succeeded. This is what you are meant to do. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so if that's how we are on smaller scales, I see that for us as a collective. And yeah, that's what I want. I want Black women to just be able to exist and to be joyful and to support each other. And with that, we could literally take over the world spiritually, financially. We could literally live all together and raise these kids. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, just it could be a thing. It could really be a thing. And this is no shade to the men. Love my Black men, but I am really in a season of loving on Black women, not romantically, but just loving on us and making sure that I'm always being of support and care and concern to Black women in all spaces.
I would really love to see in the future more conversations about sex in as a form of love. I think that there are so many spaces where they're talked about separately, that they're not ever combined. And I think that is a big reason why I can speak for me personally, why it took a while for me to equate the two. But there's a reason why people say making love, like that is an actual phrase for a reason. And, the Bible is so clear that God is love. And if you've ever read Songs of Solomon, you would know they ain't talking about baking cakes and cookies in that chapter anyway. So I would really love to see, just as a community, the church really embrace a very natural thing that happens between people who love each other, not in the frame of marriage, because they weren't married in Song of Songs either, but that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But anyways, outside of that very restricted context, and really really give people the space to explore sex as a form of love, whether it's self-love, whether it's intimate love with a partner, the fact that it's always in this closed off corner, like locked away, like it's something that we, can only experience if we cross all these T's and dot all these I's. It feels restrictive. It feels like that's not progressive. And ultimately it breeds so much animosity in the community. It's extra shackles. And as Black women, like you said, that are already dealing with so much, we're already having to navigate all these paths outside in the rest of the world, trying to figure out how to love ourselves, how to find ourselves beautiful, how to love our children, love our families without sacrificing ourselves. Like there's so much that we're already having to do. It would really be helpful if this place that says that I'm safe is an open space for me to talk about my real feelings, my real urges as a grown woman, because that's what we ultimately are trying to get to the point of being. And sex is a part of that. And sex should be a welcome part of that. And I would really love to see it talked about in the same space as love, and not as some type of, like I said earlier, bartering tool for love, because those are not the same things.
I just agree with what they both said, and it was beautifully said. So I do not have anything to add to that.
Okay. I mean, nobody asked me, but I would love to bridge the like generational gap, I think, of some of the teachings of yesteryear with what people are actually experiencing and dealing with today, and like what women contend with in today's time versus when the good book was written, right? And so I also want to burn all podcast mics except mine. But but no, but I think that for me, that's what I'd love. And I think that the more women kind of, step into themselves and divest from some of these harmful tropes that we talked about this evening, that they understand that there is a gap to be bridged. Because I think that like it's just such a setup for failure, right? You have folks that will, when it benefits them, quote submission in certain things that they got from the Bible, and not acknowledge for the fact that you live in a hyper capitalistic society that has your woman out here hustling at the same rate of speed as you, maybe harder, right? Or this lack of acknowledging the role of sex in the human experience, and how people were marrying children and tweens in those days, and you expect fully grown adults to like to be disengaged from their sexuality because they haven't found a husband, with men that are not being raised to be husbands, that think that marriage is that women are taking something from them by marrying them. You know what I mean? It's like we got to start connecting these. It feels like when you watch a cop show and like they have the suspects on the wall. It's like we have to start connecting these lines here, because it's almost nonsensical. The way I find some churches will like talk themselves into circles. We got to bridge some of these gaps. Like we have to really talk about the ideology versus the reality, and how us getting caught up in this, I'll say like this Disneyfication of church, how harmful it is to the people who are really outside, having to deal with these half-raised men that we're supposed to be saving ourselves for, and what have you. So that is my note for the evening. Ladies, that was the last question. Any additional notes? How do you feel? Are you scared if I get an email tomorrow like, Shrey, do not upload this? You see? If I do, I'm just gonna make a diss track and upload it on top of BBO.
Well, Nona knows it's coming out, so I'm in the clear. My mother finally knows I'm having sex after 35 years, so she knows it's coming. She knows it's coming. It's on its way.
I know this whole don't ask, don't tell that the two of you guys had. Like, your mom is new. When Lisa, when we had that conversation, I was like, what do you mean your mother doesn't know? You're 30 plus years old. She was like, she don't know. I'm like, okay, girl. Okay. But that is it. That is all. Thank you so much for spending your evening with me. For the people watching, you can subscribe to Curls in the Hood on www.curlsinthehood.com. We are Curls in the Hood on every platform: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, the artist formerly known as Twitter. We are everywhere. But that is it. That is all. Have a good night. You guys can stay on. I'm just gonna hit stop record so we can like do a little post. Yeah, chatterization.